Okay, from the truck to the gym. Today we are going to tackle Business 101. Before we get started, hit the like button, subscribe, share, and help me grow this channel so that maybe we can help some other people as they start to get into the RV transport world. In this episode, we're gonna dive in to just some of the principles that I've learned when growing my gym that I apply now into the RV transport world. And we're gonna use a whiteboard and we're just gonna break down what it is that goes through my mind in terms of just running a successful business. But first, should we start with the tour? That's the grand tour. Seriously, started training after I went and got a master's degree and trained people in a little 400 square foot room in my house after I had moved back, which was probably no bigger, definitely wasn't bigger than the office that we have. And then just started training clients at their home. At a local gym that's no longer with us due to just poor business decisions. But and just slowly grew and grew and grew. And then the next thing you know, boom, we have a team that, helps service the community. So we're going to dive into the barrier of entry and then good business principles to practice. And again, I'm going to use either this whiteboard or that whiteboard over there and just give you an inside look at, how you go from, a one-man show to really expanding things and then just making sure that you have a pulse on your business. So that way it's not that you're just stressed out running circles in your business, but you really understand it as a game, as if you were looking, down here and there was a chessboard and you're moving pieces, so we'll give you an inside look on that. Hopefully it's helpful. And here we go. With any business, there's going to be some type of barrier of entry. So we'll dive into that. And it's to be noted that you get to choose kind of the level of it. So, there's a threshold, we'll say, before you even get into anything. How do you get into whatever business it is that you're trying to get into? There's something, so like with the RV transport gig, it was, you need a 3/4 or 1 ton truck. It also had to be a 2010 or newer. So you get to play around with what level you choose to have that asset at. There were also just, little checklists that you had to have. In terms of with the RV transport, it was, you have to, the DOT physical, the background check, just various little things. You got to make sure you got the insurance, your mud flaps, rock guard, all that stuff. But all little bears before you can actually get into the arena of making money in that business. When it came to the gym side of things, like when I really made a leap and got a facility, well, I needed equipment for what I wanted. So I could have went out and bought all brand new equipment. I could have leased that enterprise rental, or I could have used my money that I had available wisely. And I didn't have capital available, so I created a partnership. And the only thing that I bought new were the strength equipment so that I could just have matching equipment. But in the gym world, commercial equipment, you buy a brand new treadmill, you're like $7,000. You buy a refurbed treadmill with a extra year or two warranty, you're like $2,500. So those are things you have to weigh out when you're over here. Would it have been nice on the gym side of things to have brand new treadmills? I guess, yeah. But we're 5 years in and we're just now getting to where, I have to drop an extra $1,000 to put a new display on one. Had to put new belts and decks on some, which were around $1,200 a piece. But when you factor in initial price and then the repairs up to this date, I'm still less than a brand new treadmill. So just things you have to factor in. Think of that logic when you're looking at what truck do I get? Do I get the brand new truck? You could if you can afford it and you don't care, or you don't care that you have a $700 to $1,000 payment. Sure. But then we'll talk about just your expenses, so your fixed expenses and your variable expenses when you're in the business. Okay, so we've made a list of everything that it takes to get into business. And again, you weigh out what you need versus what you want, what will work, what will get you by. If you're starting up, whether you're starting up lean because you don't have the resources, say like myself when I was creating the gym that I have, or maybe you have resources, but you still want to start up lean because you don't want to lose that working capital that you have available. You can choose how you get into business. It's to be noted, I'm editing right now, but after you're in the business, we'll say in the professional driving business. What, buddy? We're gonna say hi? You say hi? After you're in the business, you've passed that threshold of being a professional driver, you now have different opportunities, different avenues to make more money. And I'm gonna talk more about that in other videos, so stay tuned. So now that we're in the business, we're gonna look at fixed and variable expenses. So I hear a lot of people talking about, in the RV transport world, talking about, oh yeah, I factor my food in and this and that. Food, in my opinion, shouldn't be considered an expense in your business, because the last time that I checked, you're going to have to eat whether you're working or not. You got to have food in your system. It's fuel for your body. So that shouldn't really be entered into one of your expenses when you're factoring in, is this a profitable business or not? And we'll kind of dive into, when money comes in, how do you allot, how do you allot certain funds for certain areas of the business? And I let that spill over into personal finances, and that's how we do things at home as well. So your fixed expenses are going to be things like your truck note. I have one commercial loan for my gym when I had bought out my partnership. That's the only note that I have. Truck note, or your lease agreement, your lease payment. So anything right there. And these are going to be monthly expenses, is how we're going to break it down. So you're going to have insurance. We'll put registration on here, just because your truck has to be registered as a commercial vehicle. That's an annual expense, but if you wanted to break it into a monthly expense so that you just know how much that breaks down to, add that in there. And I may be missing a few things, but that's what I can think of off the top of my head. So we'll move over to variable expenses. So your number one And other than potentially your truck payment, and I say potentially your truck payment because if you're leasing and you're paying 20 to 22 cents a mile, you'll spend more in that than you will in fuel every trip. But your fuel is going to be your biggest variable expense. You may have unpaid tolls or uncovered tolls. Again, that varies on what company you run for, because there are certain companies that will cover tolls if you're heading back to get another load. Now, you may be thinking like, hey, there's so many other things that you missed out on. So that's where we're gonna zoom out and we're gonna look at when money's coming in, how do we allocate it to certain areas to make sure that we're covered in every aspect of what we're doing. So again, I may have missed a few of these, but now what we're gonna look at is you have money coming in, right? So it's coming in and we're gonna say your general account. So with my gym, I have 14 different business accounts. I have my general account, which is where memberships, all revenue comes in. And then from there, whether it be an automatic transfer to another account on a monthly or bi-monthly basis for equipment. So I wanna say off the top of my head without looking, like $250 or $300 and some dollars on the 5th and the 20th each month that I auto transfer over into my equipment fund. I put a maintenance fund, auto transfer. And then there's variable expenses. So we do an appreciation fund. Well, it's 1% of revenue goes into that. So at the end of each month, I go in, I'll figure out, okay, here's what our gross revenue was. I'm gonna take 1%, put it over here. I also do that from a profit standpoint. So I have a profit account. It's a percentage of gross revenue, boom. And then that's the reward of taking on all the stresses of being a business owner. So your money's coming in. You've entered into the business, but when you were getting started, you were trying to look at, okay, can I make money? Well, what's my truck payment? What's my insurance gonna run me? And then what's my registration? So we'll put my numbers in here. I wanna say my truck payment's like $263. My insurance, $290. And my registration, I think it was $750 for the year. So that is, we'll just round up, $65, so $62.50. I'm not factoring in what's my house payment, what's this, and that. Just the simplistic business itself. How does it work? We don't need to factor this into it yet because you'll have zero fuel if you do 0 runs. So it's not something you factor into, does this business make sense? The first thing people ask when you're starting a business or looking to get into it, typically it's how much money can you make? So we've covered that. Doing this at a non-full-time, always on the road basis, you can clear over 6,000 in a month, easy. That's what I did my first month, and I did a lot of short runs. So there's the revenue that is potentially able to be had, and again, if you're going to be doing RV transport full time, you'll bring in more than that. So how much do you need from a fixed standpoint to make this work? So from just a monthly standpoint, and I'm sure I'm missing some things, like certain inspections or whatnot. There's probably a few more minuscule things that would go under here, but that's what I need. So how much money can I bring in? Will that cover my fixed expenses? Then we can dive in to this. You've heard people talk about you got to make sure it's X amount of pay per mile, this and that. Again, that is to the gym world, like looking at a member or a potential client that comes in. What's our members' average monthly payment? And then what's the lifetime value of one member? those are great things to focus on to increase gross revenue right here. They're fine-tuning things that you'll focus on after you've got started and you have everything set up. So we have revenue. Here's how I set things up. So goes into my general account. I've mentioned in previous videos, I take a maintenance fee out of every run that I do. So 15% goes into my maintenance account. So I didn't include that up here because if I'm not on the road, I don't have maintenance. But to think that issues won't come up would be very silly of one. So I have a maintenance account. In terms of with RV transport, this is all I have set up. There's not a lot of moving parts. From there, well, actually you could say into my personal account. So I'll always leave some money in my com data card. We'll call the general account your com data card, or whatever card your company, how they pay you. And I always leave money on there so that I can get the fuel discounts and whatnot. I'll bring over what I'm paying myself in terms of with the gym. Like, I'm a W-2 employee, so I pay myself as an employee of the business. There would be no need, unless you had multiple drivers, even at that point, you wouldn't need that in this particular setup in terms of RV transport. So we talk about food, things like that. We go over here. So we in my personal finances, we have a grocery account. So we allot so much money twice a month that goes into there. Any groceries we buy, boom, right out of there. So if you're on the road, whether you practice this or not, maybe this seems intriguing to you and you're like, hey, you know what? Like, that type of separation and clarity would decrease the amount of stress that goes on from a financial standpoint. A great book to read where I started implementing all this, and I had actually read it 2 or 3 times before I pulled the trigger on doing it, is Profit First. So I will try to get fancy and put a picture of it right here. But it just talks about, it's a great story. It just talks about separating your finances so you can really see what's happening. Whereas an accountant would tell you, hey, just have it all in your account and just keep a ledger, just write it down. Well, the actual separation of your funds brings a lot of clarity. At least it does to me. You may find that that's overkill and you're gonna bash me in the comments, Matt, but that's okay. Still appreciate you. So when it comes to when I'm on the road, I'm gonna be eating anyways. It comes out of my food expenses, whether I'm doing RV transport or not. It's right here. In our personal setup, we then have a gas account too. So anytime that we fuel up, we use the fuel card. Now when I'm fueling up, I'm always using this now because, well, I get cheaper rates with the truck I have. And then we have a savings. That's how we're set up on the home front. And it just brings a lot of clarity. So it's not like, oh crap, do we have enough money to buy the groceries? Because you're just looking at this. Well, what other payments are coming out? Food's coming out of the food account. And then what happens is, so when you set all this up, you're gonna budget what you think you need. And then you may find that month after month, you keep going over. You look at it, you analyze it, make sure you're not just ridiculously spending or being irresponsible, but then you adjust. So that's called budgeting. Set a budget, implement the budget, and then analyze it and adjust if needed. So if you keep going over, well, instead of $700 a month for groceries for the family, looks like we need about $850 because we're going over by 100 and something. So you just adjust. Same thing on the fuel side of things. And then, so from here, what we'll do is we'll dive into a screen share on my computer where we'll look at the spreadsheet that I have to further analyze, where the fuel is coming out, what the actual profits are. So again, then you can really have a pulse of the business. Because the reality of it is that if you're just looking at, again, kind of those more acute in the weeds variables where it's, what's my pay per mile? Well, if you're only doing a 300-mile run, okay, maybe it was 4 times your expenses, but that doesn't pay the bills. So I know from a business standpoint, I need $618 a month to cover my business expenses on here. Again, minus any other things that I may have forgot, but they would be pretty minuscule ones. So out of that, then what I do is I would be like, okay, hey, from a household setting, from a personal setting, how much money do we need, for me to provide so that we can be happy and successful, however you define that. So then it would be like, oh, okay, well, from a personal standpoint, I need to be bringing $4,000 a month to the table to make our life work. Okay, so then I need $4,600 a month to be right here and that, to be good here and to cover this. Now there's going to be variable expenses, so I would need to bring in a little bit more than that, and that's where having that spreadsheet and looking at it, and obviously as you're seeing money come in to your Comdata card, transferring it over to your bank account, you're seeing it happen. The spreadsheet just puts it all on paper and provides clarity, so you can really see what's happening, and then you can start fine-tuning things. So what I'm going to start looking at now is, should I be using a fuel additive? Is it actually increasing my miles per gallon, which makes me more profitable, which should then, if I haven't consistently used it. So when I start consistently using it, after I just bought a case of additive, do I see my fuel expenses per trip lower, my miles per gallon increase? If so, does that threshold of what I'm paying in additional fuel additives make sense to continue doing that? You can't really know if that's working or not unless you're analyzing the numbers. Otherwise, it's just this emotional feel. Man, I feel like every time I use that additive, it works great. Feelings are great, but they're not promising, okay? Numbers don't lie. So when you can look at the numbers, you're always going to make sound decisions. So now we are on the spreadsheet. So your initial question should be, when starting a business, is how much money can it make? What are my expenses? So we talked about fixed expenses. One of the questions that you would have specific to RV transport would be, okay, yeah, that sounds good. Like what do you spend in fuel? And so you'll get some approximations from people, and you'll start to kind of do the math, and you'll be like, okay, well, yeah, it still makes sense. It's like, hey, I clear this much when I do a run. Okay, well, cool. But then you should know what your numbers are. So as we dive into this, we're just analyzing our numbers. And so I keep track of it, and I'm going to do a better job over here on like my loaded MPGs. I'm going to do a better job of being more specific, and I may even then add a unloaded to where I'm really capturing everything, because I'm going to start consistently using fuel additives, and I want to know, is that increasing my miles per gallon? Because if so, and weighing out how much it costs per fuel up, then it'll either make sense to keep doing it, or it'll make sense to not do it because it's not actually giving me a return on my investment. So we dive into our gas expenses, per trip. We can look at it. So let's just look at one run. Let's go to, we'll say, this Colorado run. So right here, line 14. So when I picked it up, how many miles from my house to that yard, from the yard to the dealership, and then from the dealership back to my house. So total miles, how many days I was working. And so with that, I wasn't actually gone for 5 days. I came back home and delivered at the beginning of the week. How many nights? Now we get into the variable expenses. So my payout, which any tolls were taken out ahead of time in terms of tolls that are covered by the company before this payout. This was the actual payout that was put onto my COM data card. So this would be that revenue coming into your general account, because we'll call your general account your COM data card. And then what you do with it from there is up to you. In particular, what I do is I'll transfer. I always leave $400 to $500 in my general account on my COM data card. I'll transfer everything else to my personal checking account. What I'll then do is just manually go in, and that 15% maintenance, I will transfer $257.13 over to a savings account that is dedicated as my maintenance account for any issues that come up. So then I go over, I have a little checkbox, hey, did I actually transfer it? And then what was my gas expenses? So going back into my COM data card from the dates of when I pick up, when I drop off, within that date range, how much fuel did I have? $354. So I had a actual profit. If you're looking at a normal W-2 pay stub, the net, what actually goes into your bank account, was $1,102.28. This is what I made on that. These things, so my gas expenses, my loaded miles per gallon, and then just diving into trailer weight, length, brand, allows me to analyze the numbers a little more. Because if I can see something over here, and I can, if I'm looking at the gas expenses, and then I can find a correlation between a certain weight or whatnot, or I even go and look at, what the destination was, so what route I took, then I'm going to be able to make some changes into what I'm doing in terms of, operations, or in this case, in RV transport, in terms of what routes I choose and what trailers I choose to be more profitable. Now, one thing I plan on adding to my spreadsheet, cats, is a percentage column. So, I would go over here and add one to the right. And then what I want to do is just look at the percentage of profitability. So when you just see numbers, but this was a $360 run and this was a $2,000 run, it doesn't give you the real substance that you're looking for. But let's see if I can do this on the fly. First things first, we want this in a percentage form. And then I'll change this accordingly. Equals our profit divided by our payout. And then I can drag this down. I'm not going to go to that last one. I'm actually currently on that run. I'm going to drop it off in 2 days. But I wanted to include, and it's going to be a little more than that as far as payout, but I just wanted a 2-month total on here. So now we can look at every run on the same playing field, apples to apples. So we don't really get to, in the RV transport world, we don't get to choose what the pay is per mile. It's already set. We're a 1099 and we get to pick what's on there. We don't get to negotiate per se. So there's a very small area of trying to pick higher paying runs. It really then just comes down to travel trailers, fifth wheels, non-CDL versus CDL, and you know the weight that you're going to be pulling to increase your pay. But then what you may see is your loaded miles per gallon drop. So we can actually look at it and see what is the most profitable run. Again, I'm going to leave this on here because it was something I've been wanting to do. And call this a profit margin. And then what I want to do is copy that over. So I do want to see, which I want to see what my average margin is on any given trip. Rookie mistake there. I don't want the sum of it. I want the average of it. Which I guess on here, you have to type it out. Okay, so then I'm going to go down this column. And so my average payout to take home is 64%. How do I want to maximize that? I see some 70s in here. Well, then, and I don't feel like I have enough data right now to actually make a guaranteed decision. You need enough data for it to be reliable so that you know the outcome is going to be the same outcome every time. How do you think businesses go from small pop-up businesses to franchises? Is they know the numbers and they know it's not a prediction. It's, hey, if this happens, this will happen, because we have enough data that we're analyzing. So what I would look at is, okay, how do I make it to where that's 74%? How do I make it so that I have a 74, above 70 profit margin? What can I be doing in terms of, the grind of every haul to make that happen? Is it the type of trailer? Is it the route that I'm taking? What is it? And then I start to try to reproduce that. And well, then I would see over time, am I getting out of the 60s and into the 70s? That's where the fuel additive experiment is going to come in. Am I making a great investment, or am I wasting money thinking it's helping, but it's really not? So that's what I got for you guys on a variable expense standpoint. Hopefully that makes sense. One other thing I'm looking to add, kind of more so over on here, is finding a way to track just the wind for that route. Because as you guys know, if you're already driving, man, wind can take it from a 12 miles per gallon average to a 9 mile per hour average if it's, blowing in the wrong direction. So I'm going to add that on here at some point. Again, maybe this is overkill for some of you, but I just like to be in control of the things that I can be in control of. Whether that's too much for some or not enough for others, it gives clarity, and then you can make smarter, we'll say wiser decisions, because as you start doing run after run after run, you have enough historical data to look at and be like, man, I'm doing that wrong. I need to fix it. And then you can see it. So I hope that was helpful. It's just an inside look at a bigger picture when looking at numbers in terms of business. You have to try to ensure that you're not just looking in the weeds of what you're doing, but zoom back and look at it from every angle so that you know what's happening and you know why things are happening. So if I missed anything, feel free to comment below. Again, if you find any value in this, or if you just like watching the videos and giving me crap, I'm gonna ask that you subscribe, you like or thumbs down the video. But if you thumbs down it, I'd love for you to tell me, hey, I disliked it because of this. And maybe that'll help me do a better job next time at putting out a new video. So that's all I got for you. Again, be on the lookout for a video where I'm going to talk about what other opportunities are out there after you've crossed that threshold of getting into the professional driving. You have a truck that is commercially registered for 26,000 pounds. You have other options that are right there on the table for you to pick up and go down if you so choose, if you're not just doing this full time on the road all the time. So I'm gonna dive into that later. I've actually already started recording a video on it. This run that I'm on right now is ending at a location that puts me at a place that I need to be for a certain thing for a new endeavor. So that's all I got for you. Stay tuned. Thank you if you have already subscribed, liked, shared, and for sticking around to the end. If you want access to the spreadsheet, because I didn't go over the maintenance side of it, but that's a whole nother topic, and I'm working on that as well, then I'd be happy to share it to you. Let me know. Maybe I'll just include that in the description as a shareable link. All right, guys, have an awesome weekend, and I will see you next time.